Alright, now we get on to ethics. An episode of TNG that makes me question if the people writing it actually understand ethics. Well, again, this is one of those things where they are looking to do a morality play about a very specific topic, which is the whole idea of assisted suicide, which back in the 90s was a big hot button question. So they decided to do an episode of The Next Generation to talk about that. And to be fair, they didn't get overly preachy. They just went into murky nonsense territory with the stuff ancillary to it. Not even the direct question in and of itself. The direct question got handled reasonably well. It's the other stuff that they put around it that got weird. So, the basic gist of it. As part of routine operations on board the Enterprise, Worf gets severely injured when cargo containers fall on him. Now, looking at this from a TTRPG standpoint, this seems kind of sort of like it is a simple plot hook. Because, you know, if you assume that Worf is not one of the player characters and an NPC aboard the ship that the player characters are going to have to figure out what to do with, then easy plot hook. And honestly, that is something that you could have as kind of like a bottle show episode. I don't think most players would actually like it, but it's something you could do as a bottle show sort of episode. And therein comes the problem. I don't think most players would actually want to do a bottle show about this. Because you have an NPC who's literally asking you to kill them, and you have other NPCs who don't want you to kill them, and it's just, ugh. Also, the way Worf acts in this is one of those things where you would have to, in real life, question if you are able to leave this person alone without the person deciding to kill themselves. It's like that. So, what are the murky ethical questions? 1. Because of the fact that Dr. Crusher is not actually a neuroscientist and not a specialist in neurological disorders and intense neurological trauma, she calls as a specialist Dr. Toby Russell. Dr. Toby Russell does several things that are experimental medicine, and that's where the weird ethical questions come in, because of the fact that Dr. Crusher is generally opposed to using experimental medicine and refers to Dr. Russell's methods as shortcuts, which is kind of strange because of the fact that Dr. Crusher is trying to tell Dr. Russell that using a handful of deductions about your patient to cure them of their debilitating spinal injury is a bad idea? It's because here's the thing. Worf wanted a full recovery so badly that if he didn't get one, he was going to kill himself eventually. Yeah, they established that in Act 1. And, you know, Crusher would rather have Worf live in a paralyzed state than do an experimental treatment. Really? Really? Yeah, that's the part where the ethical questions of this don't make a whole lot of sense, is because Dr. Crusher's logic behind criticizing Dr. Russell is kind of wonky, because it's solely predicated on the fact that Dr. Russell's treatment was experimental and had never been tried before. I mean, it's experimental. Duh. Experimental treatments are not proven to work because you have to try them and experiment with them in order to prove them to work. And I mean, in fairness, Dr. Crusher does assist with the procedure, does go along with all of Dr. Russell's ideas to make the procedure work. And as a result, the procedure does in fact actually work in the end. It's just that Dr. Crusher's like, yeah, I know it actually worked, but it shouldn't have worked because you didn't put in the preliminary prerequisite research, but in order to be 100% certain it would work. Yeah, research how? That's where I had the issue with this. It's like, yes, I understand the concept of preliminary research. The problem here, though, is that there is a certain level of understanding that cannot be obtained without experimentation. Good luck finding people with disabled nervous systems to experiment on for your experimental neurological treatments. Anyways, Worf ends up being a successful case study, blah, blah, blah. Crusher points out rather rightfully that the methodology for this treatment would not have worked on a human because a human's nervous system wouldn't have been able to reset itself the way that Worf's did. Okay, but a human nervous system wouldn't have been disabled the same way that Worf's was in the first place, so you would have needed a fundamentally different methodology to treat the human in the first place. And thus this particular treatment wouldn't have been used. Like I said, it's murky and complicated, and I have to question, well, actually, you know what? Scroll down. The writers, or specifically Ronald D. Moore, aren't into writing medical stuff, so the fact that the medical explanations don't fully make sense is because Ronald Moore sucks at writing medical drama. You doing this in a TTRPG, yeah, write what makes sense to you. If it doesn't make sense to your players, so be it, but do your best to write something that makes sense. Don't try to copy the show word for word, because of the fact that a lot of time what was written in the show is word salad, and doesn't actually have any real meaning. Copying that word salad is a waste of time. Anyways, though, so what other thoughts do I have here? One of the things about this episode that is noteworthy is that while the A plot involves Worf and his crippling physical disabilities that he got as a result of a random accident, the B plot is something that's genuinely also a worthwhile plot. The USS Denver hit a Cardassian gravitic mine and needs to be rescued so that the crew of the USS Denver and the passengers on board the USS Denver, because it was being used as a population transport at the time. Yeah, the Enterprise needs to rescue them so that they don't, die or something. Oh, also, a planet did actually crash land. or ship crash landed on a planet in the Maricore system. Oh, a Yorkshire class vessel, which is a beta cannon ship design. Really? We don't even have a picture of it in beta canon. Wow. Okay then. So, again, population transport, something freighter type thingy. We don't actually know what it looks like. Honestly, that is actually a plot point that you could have as a very meaningful story hook too. I mean, seriously. A plots and B plots in Next Generation episodes are often so utterly unconnected that it becomes readily apparent that you could re-edit some of these episodes so that the A plot and the B plot were completely different episodes. They have that little to do with each other. In this particular case, the only connection between the USS Denver plot and the Worf plot is that Dr. Russell helps Dr. Crusher treat some of the people that were on the USS Denver. Literally the only thing that the two of them have in connection. And if I remember right, Dr. Russell doesn't actually do anything particularly interesting on any of the oh, the Baratheon thing. She tries to treat one of the USS Denver casualties with Baratheon instead of something that was more proven to work. Okay, now that is actually something that is worth considering unethical. But as I mentioned earlier, it's one of those things is that there's a point where real world experimentation is needed. Now, whether or not it was ethically the right thing to do, that is a very hard question. And honestly, in this specific case, I do think Crusher was right because the fact that you're here to render medical assistance, not experiment on people. And to be honest, though, is that if you could create a adequate case for the Baratheon being more likely to have a beneficial effect than a standard treatment, then you could actually argue that the Baratheon was actually the right call. But again, this is literally the only thing that connects the A plot with the B plot. The B plot on this, though, is actually something that if you're doing this in a TTRPG, you could actually take the B plot and just make a whole episode about that. Because, you know, a crashed starship, finding and rescuing all of the crash survivors. I mean, you could have a full episode about that. And then, of course, as a follow-up, it's like, why did this starship crash? We should go figure out why the starship crashed and find the cause of the crash and do that as a follow-up episode and, you know, maybe make a series out of it if your players have fun with that. Maybe, possibly. Quite frankly, I think it'd be more likely to be a good thing to base a mission series on than the thing about having Worf be crippled and consider suicide. It's like, that was boring and lame. Literally not worth a TTRPG session, in my opinion. Now, again, if your players actually want to do that, that would be one thing. I don't think most people would. Especially if it's, you know, one of the player characters in the role of Worf and not a random NPC. Of course, that's the whole other thing, is that you need it to be an NPC that the players actually care about. Otherwise, why bother with having the mission focused on them, and why not have the medical crew handle it instead of the player characters? I mean, that's what medical personnel are for, after all, right? The whole Worf thing is something that in a lot of fiction, you have similar stories get written as a background plot that happens off screen. The only reason Worf was a main plot element is that Worf was a main character. And thus, to have the same thing happen in a TTRPG, it would need to be a plot essential NPC or a player character. Now, doing a variant plot where a plot important NPC has a special mission they need to do, but can't because they're physically crippled and needs to be, medically helped in order to be able to get the person back in a condition where they can fulfill their mission, that's a potentially valid story hook. It's a small part of a larger story, but it's a potentially valid aspect of a story, which is what I was getting at earlier, is that this is the sort of thing that you would have like, that random ensign in botany who had the ceiling land on her head. We spent 12 hours in surgery, but we think she might make a full recovery now. And have that as a one-liner that gets thrown into an episode to explain where the medical personnel were while everyone else was playing poker. Yeah, the Worf story being the A plot is only because it's Worf. If it wasn't Worf, no one, or a main character, it wouldn't be the A plot. It would be some background thing that might get mentioned. Anyway, though, yeah, this is one of those episodes where I wouldn't even think about adapting the thing directly. Someone might do it, though, but I don't personally see it as a particularly good option. However, you know, as a different way of looking at this, it's like, what if the Denver plot was the A plot and the B plot of doing the experimental medical treatments was because of the fact that certain members of the Denver's crew were left with crippling disabilities and needed to have those fixed. It could work. Alrighty then. Well, see you guys later.